KR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, could you potentially retire in your 30s? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. And I do have a line open if you'd like to call in and join the program. The number to call is 1-877-913-5357. 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Send a question to the Ask Bob section, and I will get that taken care of for you. That's off the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. Well, a little bit more today of yesterday on Wall Street. Not necessarily a good day, but the market is still looking at inflationary problems, potential recession problems, and its effect on the earnings of companies, which I believe should start any minute now after today's close at 3 o'clock. So we'll see what these earnings reports say, but this is at the heart of problems with the stock market. As long as earnings look okay, the market does all right. The minute that you start to see earnings numbers are nothing more than a report card of a corporation that says, hey, we're doing good, we're profitable, just like you expected us to be, or not so good, and the future doesn't look so good. So we'll see. I cannot imagine, and I've been wrong on this before, because the way they go about computing earnings sometimes doesn't really make that much sense. I cannot imagine earnings looking good in this environment. Like I said, hey, I've been wrong before. Just an opinion. We'll see as companies get geared up to go. And like I said, I think it starts today, so we'll get somewhat of an idea. The S&P 500 was down about 1%. Dow Jones was down a little over 0.5%, and the NASDAQ was down just about 1% as well. So we will see what tomorrow brings. The only thing that really troubles me, well, actually there's more than one thing that really troubles me, but the one thing that jumps out at me as someone who watches the markets throughout the day and every day is that this market has just gradually done nothing but fall. Really hasn't had periods, which is unusual, of where the market would go up maybe 10, 12, 15%, then start falling again, but at least had these moments where things were looking like they could recover. I think that's probably the main point I'm trying to make, is that that's the problem with the bear market, is that it gets your hopes up and then slams them to many pieces on the ground. Get your hopes up because you start to see the market start to come back to life again, start to going up, and you think, well, maybe this could be over. Maybe the quote-unquote bottom is in, and then it turns and goes the other direction, going down again. We haven't really had very many, really just looks, if you look at the look at the charts, we've only really had one meaningful kind of rally back in March that looked like, well, could this be a bottom? But it's just kind of drifted downward without hardly any volatility. That's kind of unusual. We'll keep an eye on it, keep you posted. This is Bob Brooks, 1-877-913-5357. Well, financial independence, retire early, or the FIRE movement is a lifestyle movement with the goal of gaining financial independence and retiring early. Now, there are stories of people who've taken this approach that at age, we'll just say in their 30s, have actually saved enough money, or so they think, to retire for the rest of their lives. Can you imagine that? To me, I'd get bored, but that retiring in your 30s. One of the things that I think is wrong with pop culture finance, and when I say pop culture finance, once again, that's the financial media, that's Wall Street, that's the financial services industry, is that, as we've said many times, they speak in absolute truths. They speak as if 1 plus 2 always equals 3, when sometimes 1 plus 2, when it comes to money, can equal 4. Sometimes it can equal 2. Sometimes it can equal 5. Things are not just cut and dry, black and white when it comes to money, as pop culture finance would have you believe. Probably one of the leaders, we'll say, of pop culture finance, and that's not to be insulting by any stretch, is radio host and best-selling author Susie Orman, because she speaks in absolutes, that this is something that's bad for everybody, or this is something that's good for everybody, when in reality, some things could be good for some people, some things could be bad for some other people. But rarely is it something that's consistent across the board. That's just not how money works. In fact, I often say the only absolute truth about when it comes to money is that there are no absolute truths. Think about that for a second. But she says about the FIRE movement, remember, financial independence, retire early. Her blunt response was, I hate it. Let's do 2 more. I hate it. 4, I hate it. Hate it. You say it that way. She explained that it would take a lot of money to make retirement work at, say, age 35. Of course it would. You need at least $5 million or $6 million. Then she gets carried away. Really, you might need $10 million. In her opinion, anything less wouldn't offer you enough protection from a potential financial catastrophe like an expensive illness. Last time I checked, an expensive illness was covered by health insurance. Most of it, anyway, the expensive part of it. She says, no pun intended, you will get burned if you play with fire. Now, you see, I don't like to tell somebody they can't do it. They can't, if someone came to me and their value system was such that they valued financial independence so much, and financial independence is defined as the time in your life when working is a choice, earning an income, not working is a choice, earning income is a choice. It's a choice to go, you could earn an income or you could not earn an income, either way. So I disagree with Miss Orman that this is, she can hate it, I mean, it's her opinion. And that it's not bad for everyone. If that is something that you really want to do, I would say go for it. There are some rules to the game, though. But you need to do the following. So here it goes. Number 1, I cannot imagine you going to hang up work and start to live off of your assets with debt unless you've got a lot of money. Maybe that $10 million that she's floated out there. First it was 5, first it was 6, then it was 10. I think someone 35 and under could have a pretty nice lifestyle off of $5 million. Probably maybe even two or 3 million bucks. That's just my view. But you got to be debt free. I think that's at the core of it, and that would mean pay off your house. Now, that's one of the things we talk about at retirement. We'll say at any age, whether it's 35 or 65, that you really should be doing the best you can at getting debt paid off. By the time you flip a switch, turn out the lights, close the door to your office, and you're off. Or however you're going to live. Maybe I've seen a social media where this girl's probably in her late 20s, early 30s, and she lives out of a van. Now, watching some of these videos, it's an interesting life. Now, she works remote. She's not retired. But if you were going to, say, travel around the world and live at different spots, a tricked out van that you live out of might not be such a bad idea. And of course, they also have motorhomes. They also have all kinds of new gadgets that you can live out of. But whatever it is, it's got to be paid off. Number two is, and I'm tempted to say one of the most important aspects of the game plan, and I would say that for all 7 of these, is create your emergency fund. Because that is key part of the equation. I see it this way. There's 2 main components financially to being able to retire at age 35. Or to retire at any age. I'll get to that in just a second. Maybe the suspense will encourage you to stick around. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around. I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
You've been listening to A Place to Grow with Pastor Stephen R. Hill on this station at 1 p.m. for several years now. We're very thankful for our many loyal listeners. Be sure and join us at our new time, weekdays at 4 p.m. as Pastor Hill discusses your purpose, your destiny, and how God's Word and a biblical perspective can lead to a life of gratification and fulfillment. Be with us for A Place to Grow at our new time, weekdays at 4 p.m. here on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR.
As Christians, we can rely on the never-changing promises of God to remain our anchor, no matter the storm we're facing. Wednesday on Focal Point, Pastor Mike Fabarez reminds us that even when people scoff at the idea of our Savior returning to earth, the Bible gives us endless hope and eternal purpose. Join us Wednesday for Focal Point.
8:30 a.m. on Bible School Radio, 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. 1-877-913-5357. We're talking about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, and floating out the question, could you retire at age 35 or in your 30s, in your 40s? To me, that'd still be very early. Could you do it? Susie Orman says of the idea, I hate it 4 times. I would say if you can hit these 7 parts of a game plan, then anything's possible. Anything at all is possible. The first one is be debt free. The second is emergency fund. And this is a key part of the equation. You need to have, for that expensive illness that's covered by health insurance, for the most part, you've got to have, I would say, at least 3 to 4 years of covered medical expenses, deductibles, co-insurance payments, that kind of thing, to be covered on the medical side. And then a major item breaking down, like if you did own a house at that point, the AC going out, anything like that you've got about 10 grand to cover that, and then to cover a year's worth of income. Now that's just my own equation, but I think the bottom line, what you're seeing is you really need a very large emergency fund. Is ideal. Another thing that you'll be seeing is this is not a whole lot different, this list of 7 things, than if you were going to retire at age 65, let's say, 35 or 65. The only difference is you have a lot less ground to cover at age 65. You don't need as much. Well, I take that back. You could actually get away with living off of just about the same, and I'll show you how that works. You just don't have as much time to get there and accumulate like you do if you're going to wait till age 65, obviously. Number 3, this is the important item, very important item. Once again, I'm tempted to say every one of them are, but this is very important. Be master of your expenses. You got to know down to the penny, because you're basing assumptions on these expenses. And if you're wrong, let's say that you figure quickly off the back of a piece of paper that you need about $4 grand a month. Yeah, that should cover it. Come to find out you needed $6,500 a month, and you got down, 4, 5, 6 years into it, and you realize, hey, this isn't quite cutting it, and I can't live off $6,500, but that's what I need to live off of. So you really want to spend time digging into your expenses and thinking of it not from the standpoint of, well, the main consistent items that I spend money on. That's really not what gets you. What gets you is the variable items. You need to make an estimate for car repairs. You need to make an estimate for Christmas spending. You need to make an estimate for birthdays, for kids. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. That is incredibly important to understand down to the penny and create that spending plan. That's why I tell you over and over again, for emphasis, of course, that spending plan and creating a spending plan, not a budget plan, but a spending plan, is key to do. It's key to do that. At least have 5 to 10 years data of building and spending and creating a spending plan, not a budget, but all it's doing is tracking your spending, so that you'll know exactly what about your baseline number is that you're spending each month. And I think what you'll find if you compare a couple of years at the same time, I think you'll find that there's a level of consistency. Of course, you can always have a health issue, something that comes up you weren't expecting, a big major car expense you weren't expecting that you didn't have in 1 year, but you're going to be close. So create a spending plan. Number 4, and this really should be number 1, but I got out of order. Assess your values. You've got to be sold out on retiring early, to do what you have to do to accumulate the money that you have to accumulate. I mean, you've really got to be sold out. that you value that you feel that God is leading you and supporting that value. I mean, it's got to be there, because it's going to take a lot of hard work to accumulate the kind of money that you have to accumulate to get to that point. Then the fifth one is you got to figure out your lump sum. Now, follow with me easy math. Let's say that you could live off of $40,000, everything paid off. You could figure out how to live off of $40,000 a year. Let's say that's the number. Well, let's say that you have $1 million set aside. 4% of that $1 million is $40,000. And if the $1 million grows by 2% above that withdrawal rate, then you might be okay. Now, it'd probably be better if you had $1.5 to $2 million for cushion. But $1 million, if it pays out $40,000, that could work. That's why I mean, granted, if you had the emergency fund, if you had $100 to $150 to $200,000 in emergency fund, then you might just be able to make the $1 million work. But you got to figure out your number. You got to figure out your assumptions. And I do agree with Susie Orman on one thing, is that any kind of catastrophe, financial catastrophe, you've got to be able to cover. I would think a couple $100,000 would do it. But, and that's why we have insurance and things like that. Number 6, you're going to have to invest that money. So you definitely want to have a plan A and a plan B strategy. That is critical for everybody, no matter what stage you're in, because as you're seeing, a plan A strategy when the market goes up doesn't operate very well when the market goes down. You lose money. You lose quite a bit of money. That's all we've seen this year, is loss of money and loss of ground for retirement accounts. If you have a plan B strategy and you implement that during down times in the market, and I'm not trying to say this like, oh, it's so easy. It is not easy, but it is a strategy. It's just like when summertime is here, you do certain things, you go outside a lot, you wear shorts, but when winter comes, you don't go outside a lot. Let's say you live in Chicago. It's really cold there. You live in Chicago, you don't go outside that much unless you just have to. And when you do go outside, you wear a coat and a lot of layers. You do it differently because it's the winter time. Same thing with investments. We go through seasons, but you don't see the seasons. And there's really only 2 seasons, good markets and bad markets. And I could make an argument for a third, but why complicate it? If you know what to do when a change of seasons occurs, which I would suggest we're going through right now, then you can end up with a strategy that protects the money. And the whole Plan B talk is that we can do lots of shows on that, but just introducing that to you if you haven't heard me talk about it before. Plan A strategy when the market goes up, Plan B strategy when the market goes down. Remember that when it comes to stewardship, and this is my personal belief, I think one of our greatest responsibilities is to be a good manager of risk. And we're called to be good stewards over our relationships, over our assets, over our money, over our health. I mean, you name it. Everything we have was given to us by God. The air we breathe is given to us by God. So we want to be good risk managers to manage risk. Number 7, real quick, make sure you've got adequate insurance to cover the bases. Health insurance, of course, without question. And that you're able to handle the inflation on the price increases. Just a few things to think about if you are in your 20s and go, hey, I think I like this fire movement. I want to retire when I'm 30. I would say go for it, but be smart about it. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.